You know that feeling when you've worked yourself to the bone, your stomach growling, and you open the fridge expecting that one thing that's supposed to get you through the day only to find it gone, stolen again. That's the story of how someone pushed me too far, and my revenge. Let's just say it was so hot, it nearly sent them to the grave. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on the so-called lunchbox bandit, hit that like button if you've ever had someone cross a line you could never forgive. Subscribe for more stories where justice gets served, sometimes spicy, sometimes sweet, but always deserved. 3 years ago, I found myself grinding away at a massive factory, one of those places where you're nothing more than a number on a sheet, a cog in a machine that never sleeps. 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. The kind of work that grinds you down until the only thing you look forward to is that 30-minute lunch break. That 30 minutes felt sacred, my one piece of sanity in a sea of machines, sweat, and monotony. The factory wasn't your typical workplace either. They didn't hire directly. Instead, they pulled people from 5 different temp services. That meant every day was a revolving door of new faces, half of which you'd never see again. There was no real sense of community, no long-term bonds, just bodies filling space. You couldn't even be sure who'd be standing next to you the next day, or if they'd vanish after a single shift. Thought it was chaos, but I'd carved out my rhythm. Show up, work hard, keep my head down, and take solace in small things like packing a good meal. I'm not exaggerating when I say my lunch was the highlight of my day. I'd spend my nights cooking, experimenting, making sure I had something not just to eat, but to enjoy. When you're giving 12 hours of your life to a factory floor, that little slice of flavor in the middle becomes your saving grace. That's why it hit so damn hard when I first opened the fridge and saw my lunch was gone. At first, I thought maybe I'd misplaced it. Maybe I'd forgotten it at home, or maybe I'd left it in the car, in my half-asleep state, rushing to work. I turned the fridge inside out, opening containers, moving bags around, checking the corners. Nothing. My stomach sank. I told myself it had to be my mistake. But the next day, same thing. I pulled open the fridge door at noon, and my neatly packed meal was gone again. This time, I knew it wasn't on me. Someone was stealing from me. Now, look, there's an unspoken rule in places like this. You don't touch another person's food. Ever. No matter how hungry you are. No matter how broke you are. That line is sacred. We're all suffering together. Grinding, aching, pushing ourselves to the limit. That one meal is personal. It's respect. So when mine disappeared again on day 3, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Real, raw anger. The factory fridge wasn't like a home fridge. It was a battlefield. Picture this, a beat-up white industrial refrigerator shoved into the corner of the break room, plastered with old safety reminders and faded keep clean signs no one followed. Inside, it was always chaos, mismatched Tupperware, plastic bags, half-empty soda cans, and forgotten leftovers that had mutated into science projects. And somewhere in that mess, my lunch, my lifeline, was vanishing. I didn't know who it was. Could have been anyone. Like I said, half the workers rotated in and out through temp services. Faces blurred together, names didn't stick, and trust was non-existent. It made everyone a suspect. That was the worst part. I found myself scanning people's faces during break, looking for crumbs at the corners of their mouths, a smirk, a glance that lingered too long. But nothing. By day 4, my anger turned to obsession. I couldn't focus on the machines, on my tasks. My stomach growled, but worse than hunger was the insult. Every time I thought about it, I felt stripped of dignity, powerless. Someone out there thought they could take from me without consequence. Like I was invisible, like I didn't matter. Sleep didn't come easy. I'd lie awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day in my head, thinking of who it could be, what they looked like when they stole it, whether they laughed to themselves as they ate the food I worked hard to make. I thought about confronting the whole break room, standing up and accusing everyone. But what proof did I have? None. Just an empty stomach and mounting rage. By the end of that week, 6 days straight, 6 lunches gone, I was a shell of myself, exhausted, starving, humiliated. My coworkers probably thought I was losing it. The way I slammed the fridge door shut or sat at the table with nothing in front of me while everyone else ate. Nobody asked questions. Nobody cared. That was the kind of place it was. But I cared. I cared enough that the anger inside me twisted into something else, something darker. That's when the idea hit me. It came late at night, lying there hungry, my stomach gnawing at itself. I thought about all the ways I could catch the thief. Setting up a camera, too risky, they'd probably fire me before they fired the thief. Telling a supervisor, they wouldn't care. But what if, instead of catching them, I taught them a lesson they'd never forget? A grin spread across my face in the dark as the thought grew sharper, hotter. If they wanted my food so badly, fine, they could have it. But it was going to come with a price. I thought about the spiciest thing I knew. Something so unforgiving, it would burn itself into memory. The Carolina Reaper, the hottest pepper in the world. And right then, I knew exactly what I had to do. The night I thought of the Carolina Reaper, I didn't sleep a wink. I lay there staring at the ceiling, half delirious from exhaustion, half electrified by the thought of turning the tables. But ideas that sound clever at midnight sometimes fall apart under daylight. And yet, when the alarm clock buzzed at 4:30 a.m. and I dragged myself out of bed for another brutal 12-hour shift, the idea still burned hot in my mind. The problem was, I wasn't ready. Not yet. Revenge isn't just about payback, it's about timing, precision, and making sure the lesson sticks. Jumping in too soon could ruin everything. What if they only took one bite and threw it away? What if they wised up and figured out it was me? No, this needed patience. In the meantime, the thefts continued. Day 7. Gone. Day 8. Gone. By the 9th day, I wasn't even packing full meals anymore. Just small things I could afford to lose. Crickers. A granola bar. A bruised apple. I didn't want to hand over my best cooking to whoever this parasite was, but here's the thing. They didn't touch the small stuff. My apple sat untouched. My crackers were still there at noon. My granola bar, untouched. It was like the thief had standards. Like they only wanted the meals that looked worth stealing. And you know what? That almost made it worse. It meant they weren't just desperate. They were selective. They were mocking me. I started watching the break room more closely, even timing when I left my food in the fridge. Mornings were the worst because there was no way to guard it. Everyone shoved their lunches in at the same time, then walked away. And hours later, when the bell rang for lunch, I'd walk in to find mine missing. Sometimes I thought I caught people glancing at me differently, like they knew, like they were in on the joke. The paranoia sank its teeth in deeper each day. I didn't trust anyone. One morning, I walked into the break room to drop off my lunch, a simple ham and cheese sandwich wrapped in foil, nothing fancy. As I opened the fridge door, I saw a woman I'd never spoken to before, eyeing me from across the room. She had short blonde hair and eyes that darted too quickly, like she was always calculating something. I held her gaze for half a second, and she looked away, fiddling with her phone. My gut twisted. Was it her? Another day, I saw a guy tall, broad-shouldered, one of those temps who thought he ran the place, walking out of the break room licking his fingers. I wanted to ask him right then if he enjoyed my lunch, but my chest locked up. What if I was wrong? What if I picked the wrong person? I'd look like a fool, maybe even get written up for causing drama. That's what made this so maddening. I wasn't powerless because I couldn't feet tie, was powerless because I couldn't prove a damn thing. By the second week, I'd lost almost 5 pounds. My body felt weak, shaky. I caught myself snapping at coworkers over small things, and I knew the hunger was getting to me. Even coffee didn't cut it anymore. I'd sip the bitter sludge they brewed in the break room just to fill the empty space in my stomach. One night, lying in bed with my stomach growling, I thought about quitting, just walking away from the whole mess. Maybe it wasn't worth it. Maybe the universe was testing me, and I was failing. But then I remembered that faceless thief sitting somewhere in the break room, laughing to themselves, savoring the food I poured my heart into. No, I wasn't going to let them win. The worst day came at the end of that second week. I'd made chicken fried rice the night before, loaded with vegetables, soy sauce, and sesame oil. It smelled incredible, and I couldn't wait to finally have a decent meal. But when I opened the fridge at noon, the container was gone. My stomach dropped. My chest burned. I slammed the door so hard it rattled the whole fridge, and for the first time, I lost it in front of everyone. Who the hell keeps stealing my food? I shouted into the room. The break room went silent. 10 pairs of eyes turned toward me, some surprised, some amused, none sympathetic. A few people muttered, "Wasn't me," or "Don't look at me." Others just smirked and went back to eating. No one confessed. No one cared. I sat down at the table with nothing in front of me, fists clenched, my face burning with humiliation. I could feel their eyes on me, their whispered conversations. Maybe they thought I was weak. Maybe they thought I was overreacting. But deep inside, the anger solidified into something sharper, colder. That night, I stopped doubting myself. The Carolina Reaper plan wasn't just an idea anymore. It was the only way. But I wanted to savor this, to plan it properly. So I spent the next few nights researching everything I could about the Reaper. I read articles, watched videos, even looked at Scoville charts. The Carolina Reaper sat at the very top, clocking in at over 2 million Scoville heat units. For reference, a jalapeno what most people think is spicy tops out around 8,000. This was fire on another level, pain in its purest form. I could already picture it, the thief, unsuspecting, biting into my carefully crafted meal. The first chew would taste delicious, savory, almost too good to be true. And then the fire would spread, an inferno impossible to put out. They'd sweat, gasp, maybe even cry. And me, I'd sit back, pretending to be none the wiser, while justice cooked them from the inside. But as much as I relished the fantasy, doubt still whispered in the corners of my mind. Was this going too far? What if the thief couldn't handle it? What if they had a medical condition? I wrestled with those thoughts for days. Every time, I came back to the same answer. They started this. They made me the victim. They chose to cross that line again and again. And if the heat was too much for them, maybe that was the price of disrespect. By the end of the third week, I was ready. I'd saved up for fresh ingredients. I had a plan to cook something so delicious, so irresistible, that the thief wouldn't be able to resist. And at the heart of it all would be the reprimand, finally, hidden in plain sight, waiting like a trap. The only question left was when. That Friday night, after another long shift, I laid out everything on my kitchen counter: steak, peppers, onions, cilantro, lime, and in a small, separate container, the Carolina Reapers, bright red, wrinkled, deadly dot. As I stared down at those peppers, I felt the thrill of it pulse through me. Tomorrow, the bandits' reign would end. Tomorrow, justice would be served fiery hot. But I had no idea just how far the fallout would go. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, not because I had to but because I couldn't sleep. My mind buzzed like an overworked machine. Today wasn't just another shift. Today was the day. The kitchen felt different that morning. It wasn't just a room anymore, it was my war room, my arena, my stage. The counter was cleared, the pans gleamed under the dim light, and every ingredient sat waiting like pieces on a chessboard. First came the steak, thick, marbled cuts I'd picked out with care. I seasoned them with salt, pepper, garlic, a hint of cumin. The smell alone had my stomach rumbling, but this wasn't for me. This was bait. Next, the peppers and onions. I sliced them into long ribbons, letting their sweetness and sharpness mix together. They hit the pan with a hiss, releasing that intoxicating aroma that clung to the air. And then the secret weapon. I reached for the small container where the Carolina Reapers waited. Even through the plastic lid, they looked menacing. Wrinkled skin, deep red, the kind of color that warned you nature had designed them to hurt. I slipped on a pair of gloves. The last thing I wanted was to rub my eyes by accident and end up in the ER myself. I minced them finely, the knife clacking against the cutting board. The fumes alone stung my eyes and caught in my throat. I coughed, laughed, and whispered to myself, "That'll do it." I folded the fiery bits into a fresh batch of pico de gallo tomatoes, onions, cilantro, lime juice. The colors looked innocent, vibrant even, but the heat lurking inside could bring a grown man to his knees. As I worked, I thought about the thief. I pictured them opening the fridge, spotting the Tupperware, and feeling that smug little thrill of stealing something that wasn't theirs. I imagined their first bite, their face shifting from pleasure to panic, sweat dripping down their temples, mouth on fire, and me. I'd be watching, quiet, unassuming, as if I had no idea what was happening. The thought alone was almost enough to make me laugh. Finally, I assembled the meal: warm tortillas, tender steak strips, caramelized peppers and onions, topped with that devilish pico. I garnished it with fresh cilantro and lime wedges, making sure it looked as appetizing as possible. The kind of meal you'd fight for. The kind of meal a thief couldn't resist. I placed it carefully into a clear Tupperware container. That was important. The clear lid was part of the trap. If they saw the colors, the perfect presentation, they'd be drawn in like moths to a flame. When it was done, I stood back and admired my work. It looked like something straight out of a food magazine, bright, fresh, irresistible. If only they knew the truth. For a moment, I hesitated. Was I really going to do this? Was it too cruel? What if the bandit wasn't some arrogant jerk but just someone struggling, desperate? But then I thought about all those empty lunch breaks, about my growling stomach, the headaches, the humiliation of sitting there with nothing while everyone else ate. I thought about the smirks, the whispers, the feeling of being targeted and powerless. And just like that, my hesitation hardened into resolve. This wasn't just about food anymore. This was about respect, about teaching someone that actions have consequences. I snapped the lid shut and packed my bag. The whole drive to work, I felt like my chest was buzzing. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every passing mile a countdown. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly they ached. When I pulled into the factory lot, I sat there for a moment, staring at the building. Same gray walls, same smokestacks, same hum of machinery. But today, it felt different. Today, I wasn't walking in as a victim. Today, I was carrying a weapon disguised as lunch. I walked into the break room around 7 a.m., like always. A few people were milling around, pouring coffee, tossing their bags into lockers. The fridge hummed in the corner, its white surface scarred with years of scratches and fingerprints. I opened the door, slid my container onto the middle shelf, front and center. No hiding, no tucking it behind someone else's leftovers. I wanted it to be seen. And as the door shut with a soft thud, my heart raced. That was it. The trap was set. The next few hours crawled by like days. I couldn't focus on my tasks. Every clang of metal, every hiss of machinery blurred into background noise. My mind was in the break room, imagining what was happening. Had they taken it yet? Were they waiting until closer to lunch? At one point, I almost caved and walked back to check, but I stopped myself. No, I had to play it cool. If I looked too interested, too invested, it might raise suspicion. Instead, I forced myself to keep working, though every tick of the clock drilled deeper into my nerves. By the time noon finally rolled around, my stomach was knotted tighter than a steel cable. I wiped the sweat from my palms, telling myself to stay calm, stay casual. I walked into the break room with everyone else. The moment I stepped in, I felt the tension humming in the air. People were gathered near the fridge, talking, voices a little higher. Sharper than I heard it, a scream high-pitched, panicked. "Help, somebody help." My heart leaped into my throat. I pushed through the crowd, and there on the floor was a woman, clutching her throat, gasping for air. Her face was red, tears streaming down her cheeks. It took me a second to realize. She was the bandit. She was the one, and the Reapers were working exactly as intended, only worse than I imagined. People scrambled around her, shouting, panicking. Someone ran to call for help. Another grabbed water, but she pushed it away, wheezing. "No, can't breathe." That's when it hit me. She wasn't just in pain, she was having an asthma attack. The room exploded into chaos. Chairs scraped back, people shouted over one another, and all I could do was stand there, frozen. I'd wanted her to suffer, yes, but this, watching her gasp for air, her chest heaving, her hands clawing at the floor, it was almost too much. Someone shouted, "Call an ambulance." And within minutes, paramedics rushed in. They knelt beside her, pulling out equipment, speaking in quick, urgent tones. The crowd pressed back, everyone watching with wide eyes. And me, I stood at the edge, silent, my stomach churning. This was it, the climax I'd planned for, the bandit caught in the trap. But instead of feeling triumph, I felt something else. A cold, heavy weight pressing down on me. I'd won, but had I gone too far? The paramedics worked fast, their voices sharp and precise. Pulse dropping, "Get the oxygen ready. She's not stabilizing, move, move." I stood there with the rest of the break room, pressed against the wall, watching it all unfold as if through fog. My stomach twisted. I had imagined her sweating, gulping down water, maybe rushing for milk. Humiliation, not life. But now here she was, sprawled on the linoleum, chest heaving, eyes wide with panic. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Was I a monster? Had I just taken this too far? The crowd was restless and whispering, others pacing, a few covering their mouths with trembling hands. A guy near me muttered, "Jesus, what the hell did she eat?" Another whispered back, "Looked like fajita." But that can't do this, can it? Nobody looked at me. Nobody even suspected. And yet, my heart hammered like a guilty drumbeat, echoing in my ears. The paramedics finally hoisted her onto a stretcher, her body jerking slightly as they strapped on the oxygen mask. They wheeled her out in a rush, leaving the room in stunned silence. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the hum of the vending machine and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. Then the murmurs began. "What the hell just happened? She just dropped out of nowhere. You think it was her lunch? Man, maybe she's allergic to something." The theories flew, but no one said the word I feared most. Poisoned. Nobody looked at me. I was invisible again, the way I had been for weeks, but now, that invisibility was my shield. I sat down at one of the tables, hands folded, forcing myself to breathe evenly. Inside, though, my chest was a battlefield. Part of me felt vindicated. The bandit had been unmasked in the most dramatic way possible. She'd suffered, just like I wanted. But another part of me trembled with guilt. I hadn't expected asthma. I hadn't expected her to nearly suffocate on the break room floor. And yet, wasn't that her fault? She was the one who stole it. Again and again, if she had just respected what wasn't hers, none of this would have happened. I clung to that thought like a lifeline. The rest of the shift was surreal. People buzzed about what happened, but soon enough, the factory swallowed them back into the grind. Machines roared, metal clanged, sweat dripped. It was as if nothing had happened at all. But I couldn't shake it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face red, tear-streaked. Gasping. When the day finally ended, I walked out into the cool evening air, sucking in deep breaths like I hadn't breathed all day. My legs felt heavy, my stomach hollow, but my mind was racing. I didn't tell a soul. Not my coworkers, not my friends, not my family. I carried the secret alone, like a stone in my chest. Days passed. The woman, my thief, wasn't back at work. Rumor had it she'd been hospitalized, recovering. Some said asthma attack. Others whispered allergic reaction. Nobody knew for sure, and nobody suspected me. Life at the factory slipped back to normal. But something had changed. My lunches, untouched. Day after day, I opened the fridge to find my food exactly where I left it. Nobody dared to take a single bite. The bandit was gone, and her downfall had sent a message louder than words. Don't mess with what isn't yours. For the first time in weeks, I sat at the lunch table with a full meal, eating slowly, savoring every bite. And though my coworkers chatted around me, though the machines rattled in the distance, inside me there was only silence. I'd won, but victory didn't taste as sweet as I thought it would. It was spiced with something darker and unease that never fully left me. Even now, years later, I still remember that day in vivid detail. The smell of steak fajitas, the sound of her scream, the sight of her crumpled on the floor. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I went too far, if maybe I crossed a line I shouldn't have. But then I remember the weeks of hunger, the humiliation, the stolen dignity. I remember the choice she made to take from me, over and over, without care for how it hurt. And I tell myself this, she earned it. Some people only learn when the fire touches their skin. And for the lunchbox bandit, fire was exactly what she got. Justice comes in many forms. Sometimes it's a quiet word, a confrontation. Sometimes it's the universe catching up with someone in its own time. But every once in a while, justice comes sizzling hot served in a Tupperware, disguised as a meal, waiting for the greedy hands that don't know when to stop. I never confessed. She never accused. It became a ghost story, whispered in the break room, a cautionary tale about respecting boundaries. And me, I carried on, a little heavier, a little colder, but no longer invisible. Because in that factory, for a moment, I reminded them all that even the quietest people can fight back. If you felt that justice was finally served, hit that like button. It helps more people hear stories where karma bites back harder than anyone expects. And if you've ever had someone cross the line with you, subscribe for more tales of revenge, justice, and the satisfaction of watching the tables turn. Because sometimes, payback isn't just a dish best served cold, it's a dish served spicy.